There's a version of grocery shopping that most of us live inside without ever questioning it. We walk the same aisles, grab the same brands, trust the same labels, and assume that if something is sold on a shelf in a regulated country, it has been vetted, tested, and approved for our well-being. But the truth is a lot messier than that. And today we are going to walk through some of the most overrated, misunderstood, and quietly misleading products sitting in your kitchen right now. This is not about panic. It is about pulling back the curtain on how food actually gets made, marketed, and sold to you, so you can make choices based on facts instead of packaging. Let's start with bread, because bread might be the single most trusted food on the planet. It is soft, familiar, and feels wholesome by default. But a lot of mass-produced bread on grocery shelves is a chemistry project dressed up as a bakery item. Many industrial loaves contain dough conditioners and preservatives designed purely to extend shelf life and create that artificially soft, springy texture that never seems to go stale. One ingredient that has drawn attention from food safety researchers is a bleaching and conditioning agent that has been linked, in some studies, to respiratory irritation among factory workers, who handle it in concentrated form. And it has been banned outright in the European Union and several other countries, while still being permitted in some other markets. That does not necessarily mean a slice of bread is dangerous, but it does mean that the loaf sitting in front of you may contain compounds that other countries have decided are not worth the risk. Beyond that single ingredient, most supermarket bread is bulked up with added sugars, unnecessary oils, and a long list of stabilizers that have nothing to do with nutrition and everything to do with shelf life and manufacturing efficiency. Well, it's nice. The fix here is not complicated. Bread made with a short ingredient list, real flour, water, yeast, and salt is usually the better option, and it is often sitting right next to the heavily processed loaves for a similar price. Now, let's talk about something almost everyone assumes is automatically healthy: olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil has built a reputation as the gold standard of cooking fats, backed by decades of research into the Mediterranean diet. The problem is that the olive oil industry has one of the highest rates of food fraud in the world. Multiple independent investigations and lab tests over the years have found that a large percentage of oils labeled extra virgin on store shelves fail to meet the actual chemical and sensory standards required for that label. Some are cut with cheaper, refined oils. Some are made from olives that were damaged or overripe, which technically disqualifies them from extra virgin status, even though the label still says otherwise. Some are old and oxidized long before they ever reach your cart, which strips away much of the flavor and the beneficial compounds you're paying a premium for. This does not mean olive oil is a scam. It means that the label alone is not proof of quality, and that price, harvest date, and country of origin on the bottle tend to be far more reliable indicators than marketing language like pure or light or picture of a sun-drenched grove on the label. Bottled water might be the most successful marketing triumph in modern retail history because in most developed countries, tap water is tested more frequently and regulated more strictly than bottled water is. Municipal water systems in many countries are required to test multiple times a day for contaminants, while bottled water companies in some jurisdictions may only be required to test far less often. Several independent research groups have found microplastic particles in the majority of bottled water brands they tested, sometimes in higher concentrations than what shows up in tap water, because the plastic packaging itself can shed tiny particles, especially when exposed to heat or sunlight during shipping and storage. Some bottled water is literally just filtered municipal tap water repackaged and sold at a massive markup, sometimes labeled with vague terms like purified or drinking water rather than spring water, which is a meaningful distinction if you read the fine print. None of this means bottled water is dangerous in an emergency or when local water quality is genuinely a concern. It means that for most people in most situations, a reusable bottle and a decent filter accomplish the same goal for a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the plastic waste. Cooking oils deserve their own conversation because the recommendations have shifted dramatically over the past couple of decades, and a lot of consumers are still operating on outdated information. For years, certain vegetable oils high in omega-6 fatty acids were marketed as heart-healthy simply because they were low in saturated fat, without much attention paid to how those oils behave once they are repeatedly heated to high temperatures, which is exactly what happens in most restaurant fryers and a lot of home cooking. Repeated heating of certain refined oils can generate compounds linked to inflammation and oxidative stress, and several nutrition researchers have become far more cautious about recommending oils that are highly processed and unstable at high heat. Oils that are more stable when heated, including certain traditional fats, tend to hold up better under real-world cooking conditions. The bigger issue is less about any single oil being evil and more about the fact that a lot of oils marketed as light or heart smart are heavily refined, stripped of the nutrients that made the original source food valuable in the first place, and then reintroduced into your diet in enormous quantities because they are cheap to produce at industrial scale. Breakfast cereal is where a lot of families unknowingly start their day with more sugar than a dessert. Some of the most popular cereals marketed directly at children contain sugar as the first or second ingredient by weight, meaning that a single serving can contain close to the daily recommended sugar limit for a child before they have even left the house for school. What makes this particularly frustrating is how the packaging works against the consumer. Words like whole grain, fortified, and made with real fruit are technically true while still describing a product that is nutritionally closer to candy than to a balanced meal. Fortification adds back synthetic vitamins and minerals that were stripped out during processing, which sounds beneficial on paper but does not change the fact that the base product is often refined grain and sugar. The healthiest move, if cereal is going to remain part of your routine, is to actually flip the box around and look at grams of sugar per serving rather than trusting the claims splashed across the front. Fast food supply chains are worth understanding not because fast food is a surprise to anyone, but because the scale and uniformity of it is genuinely staggering once you see how it works. A single fast food chain might source ingredients from thousands of different farms and facilities, all of which have to produce a product that tastes, looks, and behaves identically whether you're eating it in one city or a city on the other side of the country. Achieving that kind of consistency requires an enormous amount of processing, standardization, and additive use that most customers never think about. Produce is often selected less for flavor or nutrition and more for shelf stability and uniform appearance. Meat products frequently go through mechanical processing and are combined with texturizers, flavor enhancers, and preservatives to maintain a consistent taste across every single location. None of this is necessarily illegal or hidden. It is disclosed in ingredient lists if you actually look. But the gap between how fast food is marketed, as fresh, simple, and craveable, and how it is actually manufactured, as a highly engineered industrial product, is enormous. Organic food labeling is another area where consumer trust has outpaced consumer understanding. Organic certification is a real and meaningful standard in many countries, restricting the use of synthetic pesticides, genetically modified organisms, and certain additives. But organic does not automatically mean more nutritious, and it does not mean pesticide-free, since organic farming still permits certain approved natural pesticides, some of which can be used in larger quantities than synthetic alternatives to achieve a similar effect. Organic also does not mean local, and it does not mean humane, and it does not mean minimally processed. You can buy organic cookies, organic soda, and organic potato chips that are just as calorie-dense and nutritionally empty as their conventional counterparts, just with a green label and a higher price tag. The value of organic certification really depends on what you personally care about, whether that is reducing synthetic pesticide exposure, supporting certain farming practices, or avoiding genetically modified crops. But it is not a blanket guarantee of health that justifies doubling the price of every single item in your cart. Now let's talk about the tricks built directly into the architecture of the grocery store itself, because a lot of what feels like your own free choice while shopping has actually been engineered by people who study consumer psychology for a living. Essentials like milk, eggs, and bread are almost always placed at the very back of the store, forcing you to walk past dozens of tempting high-margin products just to reach the items you actually came in for. Eye-level shelving is not random either. The products placed at adult eye level tend to be the ones with the highest profit margins for the store, while cheaper generic alternatives are often placed on lower or higher shelves that require more effort to notice. End cap displays at the end of aisles are frequently mistaken for sales or special deals, when in reality brands often pay for that placement, specifically because it increases impulse purchases, regardless of whether the price is actually lower than what is sitting on the regular shelf. Even the music and the layout of the store are calculated. Slower music has been shown in retail studies to encourage shoppers to linger longer and spend more, and stores are frequently redesigned specifically to disrupt a shopper's memorized route, forcing you to search for familiar items and pass more products along the way. Understanding these tricks will not make you immune to them, but it does make it a lot easier to shop with a list and stick to it. Finally, let's address protein powder, an industry that has exploded over the past decade on the back of a very real, very legitimate health trend, and has attracted a fair amount of low-quality and outright deceptive products, along with the genuinely good ones. Independent lab testing of protein powders has repeatedly found products with measurable levels of heavy metals like lead, arsenic, and cadmium, often at concentrations higher than what is considered safe for regular daily consumption, particularly in plant-based powders, where the base ingredients can absorb these metals from soil during growth. Some manufacturers have also been caught using a practice called protein spiking or amino spiking, where cheap amino acids like glycine or taurine are added to a formula specifically to inflate the total protein number on the nutrition label during lab testing, without actually providing the complete, high-quality protein that the label implies. On top of that, A lot of flavored protein powders are loaded with artificial sweeteners, thickeners, and gums to improve mouthfeel and shelf stability, which can cause digestive discomfort in a meaningful percentage of regular users. The good news is that independent third-party testing organizations exist specifically to catch these problems, and looking for a product that has been certified by one of these independent labs is one of the simplest ways to filter out the worst offenders in a crowded and largely unregulated supplement market. If there is one thread connecting everything we have covered today, it is this. The food and grocery industry is not lying to you outright most of the time, but it is very good at using technically true language to create an impression that is more flattering than reality. Natural, light, made with real ingredients, heart healthy. These phrases are marketing tools first and nutritional facts a distant second. The antidote is not to become paranoid about every single purchase, because that is exhausting and unsustainable. The antidote is to build a small set of habits, flip the package around and read the actual ingredient list, pay attention to where and how a product was tested rather than just what the front of the box claims, and remember that the most heavily marketed version of a product is rarely the same thing as the best version of that product. Once you start looking at your grocery list this way, you will notice you do not need to overhaul your entire diet or your entire shopping routine. You just need to get a little more skeptical about the products that have earned your trust simply by being familiar, because familiar and honest are not always the same thing.